They never called me by my name. To my family, I was just the quitter, the soldier who didn't have the guts to finish what she started. My brother made sure everyone at the table heard it that night, his wine glass lifted high, his smirk cutting deeper than any bullet I'd ever dodged. My name is Raya Cole, and I've carried 1,000-pound silence since the day I walked out of the army. They thought my silence meant shame. What they didn't know was that silence can be armor, until the moment you're forced to break it. The lake wind knifed through the door seams, fogging the windshield in thin breaths as I sat parked outside the lakeside Grand. The gala lights pulsed behind the glass canopy like a pulse I didn't share. In my wallet, a worn leadership coin pressed a cold circle into the leather, weight without noise. My phone blinked with one unheard voicemail, my mother's voice, careful and clipped. "Don't make this messy. Show up. Don't turn it into a statement." I went in anyway. The rotary banners framed the marble staircase. A string quartet skimmed through something bright. On the easel by the ballroom entrance, the sign managed 2 celebrations in one line. 40th anniversary, Ward for City Council, Winter Gala. Of course it did. The maitre d' pinned a smile to his face and pinned a place card to my lapel. And just like that, I was part of the tableau my family preferred. Quiet, present, useful. The head table sat dead center beneath a chandelier the size of a small car. My brother had claimed the middle seat, cufflinks flashing whenever he gestured. He saw me before I fully reached the table and raised his glass with the timing of a man who adores an audience. "To family," he said, and let the pause hang. "And to resilience, even for those who couldn't quite finish." His eyes touched mine, soft as sand in a wound. "To the quitter," there was a murmur of laughter. "Too thin, too loyal." Someone coughed. Silverware chimed. I slid into my chair and smoothed the napkin onto my lap, like it was a flag I wasn't going to wave. The server set down a shallow dish of olive oil and balsamic. I fixed my gaze on the dark spiral as it bled outward, steadying my breath until the room's edges stopped shaking. Silence isn't surrender, I reminded myself. Sometimes it's armor. I lifted the water, felt the chill bite my fingers, and swallowed the only answer I would give, for now. At the head table, the script wrote itself. Marcus bragged through the salad course, cap rates, quick flips, a contractor who owed him a favor. Dylan took a simple toast and pivoted it into a stump speech about renewal, squeezing applause from our parents' anniversary like juice from a lemon. My mother's smile worked overtime, smoothing edges the way she polishes silver before company comes. I tried small talk, mentioned the Saturday crew I help at the YMCA, food boxes, safety checks for seniors, a self-defense class for girls after swim team. Marcus didn't miss a beat. "Cute," he said, slicing bread like a judge banging a gavel. "Good for the soul. Not exactly a career." The program booklet lay beside my plate. A gold page listed major sponsors. One name was bolded twice, Grant Mercer, with a photo that radiated money and certainty. I'd heard it before. Quiet settlements, workers filing claims, women switching shifts after complaints went nowhere. The kind of reputation that travels faster than proof. A violin trill from the quartet flicked a latch in my head, and, for a blink, I was back in grit and heat. A radio crackled. A report needed my signature, neat and false. We all knew a family had been in that courtyard. I set the pen down and kept my hand there. Later, the file said I left voluntarily. The family legend says I quit. Everyone at this table prefers legends to paperwork. I folded the booklet closed and drank my water. The room hummed. The chandelier glittered. Somewhere, a truth was waiting to become loud. I slipped behind the curtain where the student performers staged between pieces. A girl with a violin stood rigid as a tuning fork, hair pinned, fingers cold. "Bridge is a hair flat," I said, easing the peg. "Breathe on the count of 4, then set." "Were you ever scared?" she asked. Not looking up. "All the time," I said. "The trick is deciding what fear is for." A laugh from the ballroom snagged my attention. Through the slit in the drape, I saw a server pass champagne. Young, ponytail, name tag Jess, and a hand that didn't belong to the tray brush the small of her back. Grant Mercer, smile set to default. Jess's lips held the service grin, but her eyes went blank the way lights cut out when a breaker flips. The quartet launched another bright piece. I stepped to go, but my mother materialized at my elbow. Voice low and urgent. "Please don't intervene tonight," she said, as if reading my posture. "Grant's watching us. He likes families that look united." I stared at her. "That why you wanted me here?" She swallowed. "It helps him see the whole picture." There it was, cleaner than any confession. I wasn't a daughter tonight. I was stage dressing. On the other side of the drape, Mercer's hand lingered again, casual as lint. The violinist beside me lifted her bow, waiting for the downbeat. I felt the room tilt toward a line I knew too well. The ballroom glittered, but beneath the chandeliers, the tension felt heavier than the music. I watched Jess weave between tables, balancing a tray, the stiffness in her shoulders telling a story the smile on her lips couldn't hide. At the VIP table, Mercer leaned back with the confidence of a man who believed rules bent around him. His hand slid lower than courtesy allowed, fingers pressing into a space that had nothing to do with service. Jess froze, her polite grin fixed like porcelain, her eyes clouding over. No one moved. Marcus shifted in his chair, but never raised his head. Dylan forced a laugh at something meaningless, angling himself toward a donor. My mother lowered her gaze to her napkin, as though if she didn't look, nothing was happening. I set my glass down, the rim kissing the linen with a soft ring. My chair slid back without a sound. Each step forward felt like a drill movement I'd practiced 1,000 times. Mercer barely had time to register me before my hand closed over his wrist. A pivot of my hips, the lock of a shoulder, the weight redirected. In less than 10 seconds, he was off balance, body angled toward the floor, his grip broken cleanly. No fists, no spectacle, just control. Jess slipped free, stepping back with a hand clutched near her chest, breath shallow. The room collapsed into silence. Marcus's wineglass hovered mid-air, frozen halfway to his lips. The violinists faltered, strings squeaking before the music died altogether. Then Marcus's voice cut through, sharp and shrill. "She's unstable! It's her army baggage!" Dylan's eyes darted around the room before he gave a tight nod to the security team. Two men in dark suits pushed through the stunned crowd, moving straight for me. The neon spill from the exit sign painted the hallway an ugly red as I stood pressed against the wall. Two guards flanking me. Marcus strode out seconds later, his face twisted in satisfaction. "You've embarrassed us again. You never fail, do you?" he hissed, loud enough for the staff hovering nearby to hear. I scanned for Jess, but she was gone. A manager whispered to the guards, "She's been sent to the back to rest." Too clean, too quick. They weren't protecting her. They were hiding her. A man in a union badge stepped from the shadows, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "You're not crazy. We've had reports on Mercer for months. Don't let them flip the story on you." His eyes flicked to the guards, then back to me. "You're not alone in this." Before I could respond, a small hand tugged at mine. Maya stood there, violin case slung awkwardly over her shoulder, her face pale. Her phone shook as she pressed it into my palm. On the screen, grainy footage played, Mercer's hand, Jess's rigid smile, my own body sliding between them, the takedown clean and fast. The music still threaded faintly in the background. "You did the right thing," she whispered, voice trembling. The guards' radios crackled. "PD's on the way," one said flatly. The hallway thickened with the kind of silence that precedes sirens. This wasn't just a family scandal anymore. It was about to become something the city would see, whether my brother liked it or not. By morning, the headlines had already hardened. "Veteran disrupts family gala." The articles leaned on the same angle, hinting at instability, suggesting post-service struggles. It wasn't subtle. It didn't need to be. Every line dripped with talking points, and I didn't have to guess where they came from. Dylan's campaign team had moved fast, spinning my 10 seconds of action into a liability. My phone buzzed until I silenced it. When I finally glanced at the screen, my mother's voicemail was thick with tears. "Please, just apologize. Say you lost your temper. If you don't, Dylan's campaign is over. Don't ruin this for all of us." Minutes later, a text from Marcus lit the screen. "You've destroyed the family's future. You'll regret this. I'll make sure of it." I let the words sit there, venom in black letters, then set the phone face down. Hours passed in that taut quiet before an email pinged into my inbox. Colonel Miles Hanley. Retired, now grayer. But I knew the name. He had been the one tasked with reviewing my file when I left the Army. His message was brief. "It's time we speak. Some truths don't stay buried forever." Almost at the same moment, a call came from a union organizer I'd met in the hallway. Jess had reached out. She was shaken, but she was ready to put something on paper if someone could keep her job safe. A fragile sliver of light cut through the storm. The smear campaign was loud, but for the first time since that night, the tide hinted at turning. The coffee shop by the marina smelled of diesel and brine, the windows fogged from bodies escaping the lake wind. Hanley sat in the corner, posture straight as if old habits refused to die. He slid a folded envelope across the table. Inside was a copy of the letter I had written years ago. My refusal to sign off on a falsified report that would have buried civilians in statistics. "Your record is clean," he said. His voice gravel but steady. "Don't let them tell it otherwise. I'll testify myself if it comes to that." The certainty in his tone hit harder than the words. For years I had carried the weight of silence. Now someone else was ready to carry it too. Later that evening, the union arranged a meeting in a back room of the hotel where staff felt safest. Jess was pale, hands trembling as she held the pen, but she signed her name at the bottom of the statement. Her voice cracked as she admitted Mercer's behavior wasn't new. "It's happened before, to others. No one wanted to risk their job." The room went still. This wasn't a single incident anymore. It was a pattern, a rot that had been allowed to spread. By nightfall, a detective from the city's Special Victims Unit confirmed what I already knew in my gut. The file was open. What began as a family embarrassment had shifted into an official investigation. The story no longer belonged to Marcus or Dylan. It belonged to the city, and to every person who'd ever been told to stay quiet. Hotel security unlocked the archive, and the detectives rolled the footage back to 742 Ope, Nantes, Ballroom Cam 3. The feed was silent and clinical, Jess sliding a tray between tuxedos, Mercer's hand dropping where it had no right to be. The detective slowed the playback, frame by frame, then jumped to Cam 5, different angle, same hand, a different server flinching away. Cam 1 caught another brush near the champagne bar. A third employee stiff as stone. 3 contacts in one night. No audio, no excuses. They moved me to a small interview room that smelled like coffee and carpet cleaner. The tape recorder light went red. "Why did you intervene?" "Because no one else did," I said. "And because keeping her safe was the least that needed doing." The questions stayed measured. My answers did too. No drama, just a line I wasn't going to let blur. Down the hall, a tech cataloged exhibits as Maya arrived with her mother and a school counselor. She handed over her phone. Then the airdropped file. Tight angle, clear faces. The string quartet still sawing through a cheerful piece while the takedown unfolded in 10 clean seconds. The detective watched twice, then logged it, time-stamped and sealed. Phones started buzzing at once. A junior staffer from Dylan's team had forwarded an email chain to a local reporter. The subject line bled across screens. "Blame Raya, protect the donor." Talking points. A plan to seed unstable veteran into headlines. The reporter posted the thread. Another outlet mirrored it. The ballroom's glitter turned toxic in the public feed. Mercer showed up with an attorney and a jaw set like concrete. He called it a misunderstanding, then pounded the conference table when no one nodded along. The detective didn't bother raising his voice. He played the CCTV, then played Maya's clip, then slid Jess's written statement across the wood like a final card. The room went very still. By the time I stepped back into the corridor, the story had flipped. I wasn't the problem to contain anymore. I was the crack that let the rot show, and the city could see straight through. The chamber at City Hall was packed shoulder to shoulder, the air heavy with the murmur of reporters, the shuffle of union members in matching jackets, hotel staff clutching folded statements, and the cold presence of cameras trained on the dais. My family sat 2 rows back. Dylan's tie was knotted too tight, his jaw locked in a smile that never reached his eyes. Marcus stared at the floor, knuckles white around a folded program. My mother kept her hands clasped, lips pressed as if in silent prayer. When my name was called, I walked to the podium. The wood was scarred with decades of testimony, but my voice came out steady. On the battlefield or in a ballroom, I said, silence can be a shield, but sometimes silence is complicity. That night, I chose not to be complicit. A ripple went through the room. Not applause, but something weightier. Colonel Hanley rose from his seat near the front. He held up a signed affidavit, his voice firm. Her separation was honorable. She refused an unlawful order. She left with her integrity intact. The words landed like iron, flattening years of rumor into dust. Questions turned sharp. Reporters pressed Dylan about the leaked emails, the strategy to frame me for Mercer's behavior. His rehearsed answers crumbled. Under the weight of the crowd, he swallowed, glanced at his campaign manager, and finally muttered, "I'm suspending my candidacy." The statement hung there, irreversible. Mercer's lawyer tried to protest, but the city attorney confirmed an official investigation was underway. The union leader announced Marcus's brokerage contract with Mercer's firm had been revoked, effective immediately. I turned to face my family. For once, no one spoke, no smirks or asides, just silence, bare, unshielded, and finally honest. Weeks later, the noise had thinned. The headlines faded, the cameras turned to fresher scandals, and the city moved on. But the echo of those nights hadn't left me. It carried me into a narrow diner that leaned against the frozen lake, its neon sign flickering pink across the thin crust of ice outside. The bell above the door chimed, and Jess stepped in. Her cheeks flushed from the cold. She wore the crisp navy uniform of her community safety course, the collar still stiff. The badge tilted slightly on her chest. Her hands trembled when she pulled her gloves off, but her gaze was steady, brighter than the fluorescent light overhead. She slid into the booth across from me, exhaling relief. "If it hadn't been for you," she said quietly, "I never would have found the courage. I would have kept letting it happen, kept pretending silence was safer. You showed me it doesn't have to be." I reached across, squeezed her hand once, firm, then let go. Words weren't necessary. Later that evening, my phone buzzed with a message. Maya had sent a photo from a youth fundraiser downtown. In it, she stood in front of a music stand, violin tucked under her chin, bow poised midair. Her message was simple, scrawled beneath in shaky penmanship. "You taught me to stop being silent." Back home, the apartment was dim, the lake wind rattling the window panes. I opened the top drawer of my dresser and slid Jess's handwritten letter beside the worn leadership coin that had traveled with me through sand and smoke and years of silence. One artifact of where I'd come from, one testament to where my choices had led. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the hiss of the wind off Lake Michigan, feeling it press against the glass like a memory. For so long, I'd thought I needed my family's recognition, or a spotlight to validate the years I'd lost. But staring at that coin and that letter side by side, I understood the truth. I didn't need applause. I didn't need the approval my brother hoarded like currency. What mattered was the line I had refused to cross, the silence I had chosen to break, and the way that choice rippled outward into lives beyond mine. Outside, the neon sign across the lake buzzed and flickered, its glow trembling on the ice. The wind kept its rhythm, steady, relentless, carrying the sound of water beneath the frozen surface. I watched until the cold bled into the glass and into my palms, then closed the drawer softly. The world would forget the details, but the echo remained, quiet, insistent, alive. I didn't need to be seen to know my stand mattered. Sometimes all it takes is holding the line when everyone else stays silent, and that is enough to change the course of a life.